Hello, everyone, and welcome to 19 Washington Square North, NYU Abu Dhabi's home in New York. Thanks so much for being here for today's presentation. We're very pleased to have Professor R. DuBois presenting his work today. Just a little bit about NYU Abu Dhabi and NYU Abu Dhabi Institute in this building. Since its inception in 2009, NYU Abu Dhabi Institute in Abu Dhabi and New York has provided a platform for exchange about the newest developments in research and scholarship across disciplines. The Institute in New York offers Washington Square community opportunities to hear experts talk about their research and the societal relevance, technology, and cultural impact and importance of the world at large, ranging from artistic and creative innovations for the world to issues of equity, inclusion, and public health, and environmental sustainability, among others. 19 Washington Square North is truly a community collaborative environment and platform for those on the square and also for those coming from Abu Dhabi. A little bit about our speaker. Professor R. DuBois is a composer, artist, and performer who explores the temporal, verbal, and visual structures of cultural and personal ephemeria. He holds a doctorate in music composition from Columbia University and has lectured and taught worldwide on interactive sound and video performance. He has collaborated on interactive performance, installation, and music production work with many artists and organizations. DuBois has lived for the last 31 years in New York City. He is a co-chair of the Department of Technology, Culture and Society, and research director of programs in integrated design and media at NYU Tandon School of Engineering. His research focuses on engineers' role in design, equity, and covering topics ranging from open source software projects for signal processing, telepresent communication systems for motion capture, citizen science for noise pollution, and design for disability. He is on the board of directors of the ISSUE Project Room and iBeam. His records are available on a number of platforms: Liquid Sky, C74, and Cantaloupe Music. His artwork is represented by Bitform's Gallery in New York City. Without further ado, Professor R. DuBois.
Thanks, Ralph. It's nice to see all of you. Thanks for coming out here on a slightly dreary day, but it's not as bad as it was. I'm going to talk about some stuff I have on my computer. I really want to thank Washington Square North for having me. It's been really fun to I don't do these much anymore, so it's fun to try to put together some things. I don't use PowerPoint. What is that Churchillism? Like power corrupts, absolute power corrupts. So it's like whatever that is. So power corrupts, PowerPoint corrupts pointlessly, right? So I don't use PowerPoint. So let's start with a pop quiz. How many of you have seen this film? All right. How many of you have not seen this film? Oh my gosh. Well, you got to go see this movie. Desperately Seeking Susan, one of my favorite movies. 1985 director is Susan Seidelman. People will often misremember this movie as starring Madonna. It is not starring Madonna. It's starring Rosanna Arquette, who plays a woman named Roberta. Madonna is Susan. Madonna is the eponymous character, and it's really about Roberta's journey into a little bit of self-awareness about something she has been up to for a while at the start of the film, where she plays somebody living in Fort Lee, New Jersey, newly married with a little bit too much time on her hands, and she becomes obsessed with Lonely Hearts ads in the newspaper in New York City, which at the time of filming was the back page of the Village Voice. And she becomes obsessed with an actual couple who are communicating through the ads, and she finds it very romantic. So there's a couple, and the guy comes into town and he takes out an ad and he says, "Desperately Seeking Susan, meet me Thursday at 5 o'clock at Pier 40, whatever," right? And she decides to go and witness this. She thinks it's really lovely, and there's some mistaken identity, and mishigas ensues, and whatever. You got to watch the movie. But what it kind of brings to the foreground is this thing that I think about a lot in our culture, which is that people are very interested now in being part of the story of others, and thinking about how we like to interact, whether that's likes on Facebook or reposts or whatever in social media. And so I've been thinking about this for a while. So I've been running a computer program on my laptop while I sleep for since 2010, actually, or 2011, using the more generationally appropriate equivalent of the back page of the Village Voice, which is the missed connections feed on Craigslist. You all know what that is, right? So the missed connections feed on Craigslist is a section of the Craigslist site where you get to take out an ad looking for someone who you believe you had a romantic encounter with and you dropped the ball, right? You all understand what I'm saying? You didn't get their number, you didn't get their name, whatever. So you take out an ad. So at night while I sleep, I download all the misconnections in the whole planet and I analyze the words because I have this hypothesis that people make second order misconnections, which is to say, I think you're cute, you think I'm cute, I take out an ad, you take out an ad, and then we mess up again because we're too busy to look. And that's where I come in. So what I do is I download them all. I compare the word counts. I look for words, I ignore words like the and of and from, pay attention to words like Union Square, names, places, whatever. Estimate the percentage chance. And if it's above 85%, I put you in touch. I email both of you and I say you two should meet. And so, so I've been running this since 2011. I'm up to my 370th wedding invitation. I have no idea what the hell this is. I don't know if this is art or social commentary or just a thing to do to keep my computer running at night. But I do think that it relates to that movie and it relates a little bit to our cultural moment. When I give talks these days, I try to do them in memoriam of people who are important in my life and my career. So the things I'm going to show you today are informed a little bit by two people who meant a lot to me who passed away recently. Steve Englander was the director for many, many years of the place that gave me my second gig in New York City. It was a punk club downtown called ABC No Rio. Joanne Green was the co-director with her late partner Helen Thorington of something called turbulence.org, which was a spin-off of New American Radio and Performing Arts, which commissioned me to do a bunch of internet works in the mid-aughts. And so I think of them as I'm making all of these pieces and showing them to you today. The first thing you got to know about me is I dropped out of engineering school, which is ironic if you know my current job. And I dropped out of engineering school because I fell in love with a machine. This is the machine. This is something called the RCA Mark II synthesizer. It still exists. It sits in a warehouse on 125th Street. At the Computer Music Center at Columbia University. This is a very cool machine. It is not by any means the first synthesizer, but it is kind of an interesting beast in the sense that it has one of the first really well-tooled sequencers where you can automate things. So it makes 4 notes at once, 1, 2, 3, 4. You drive it with a paper tape drive, kind of like a player piano. And it's so damn loud that you can't really use it in real time. So off of this person's shoulder, hidden from view, is a shellac record lathe. You would sort of set up your system and it would cut you a record. You go in the next room, listen to it, fix it, whatever. This device was created as part of an elaborate confidence scheme perpetrated on the Radio Corporation of America by these 3 gentlemen. This is a guy named Milton Babbitt who taught at Princeton. This guy named Vladimir Ussachevsky who taught at Columbia. This is their engineer named Peter Mosé. And these 3 guys grifted RCA out of $250,000 in 1955 by telling them that within 20 years, this device would replace the symphony orchestra. And RCA at the time was a little bit like Clear Channel today, iHeartRadio, except back in the 1950s, they had in their employ with their network of radio stations, unionized radio orchestras. So they were very much looking forward to a day where they didn't have to pay hundreds of musicians in every city where they owned a radio station. This didn't last very long, this gizmo. I got about 30 seconds of sound out of it in 1997 before it took out the power in the building. Sounds like this. Um, Still in tune after 45 years. It's pretty cool. It also makes white noise. It makes this kind of cool filtered noise. Here's like the drum beat. Right? You get the idea. And it was really short-lived, partially because of its size. It's 487 vacuum tubes, and within 5 or 6 years of its construction, some smart aleck in New Jersey invented a thing called the transistor, and so this thing really didn't last very long as its own device, and it was pretty quickly replaced by a box like this. So this is me, as a youngin, playing the successor to this device from 1965, which is something called the Buchla 100 series synthesizer. And I started playing around with these things, and I got really into it, and I thought they were really lovely. And I had a band, and we discovered at a certain point two things. One, that my band was really boring to watch. So we started trying to incorporate video, and the synthesizer I was performing with, the sort of 1960s, 1970s solid state analog synthesizer I was working with, was really unstable. So I played a show at a club long gone on Bleecker Street called the Elbow Room, and depending on whether the light switch was on in the women's room specifically, my entire rig would slow down and drop in pitch a musically unfortunate interval, like a minor ninth. So I'd be playing and it'd be like do 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 do, and someone would have to go pee, and then it'd be like right. So we sort of gave up, and I switched to a computer, and that gave us a couple of opportunities to do some fun things. And so one of the first things we did that I thought was fun, again, getting people engaged, was let's see if this is going to work. We got a bunch of there you go. We got a bunch of Nerf footballs. Nerf footballs. And we scooped out the Nerf, I think is what you call that, right? The substance in the Nerf football. And we put in these little wireless cameras and sellotaped them, and passed them out to the audience, right? And then this is what we projected behind. So imagine a wireless video camera projected on the screen behind you, and this is what you see. And I don't know if you can tell what's going on, but this is listening to me. It's reacting to my voice. You guys believe me? Maybe. Right? And so what it's doing is it's doing this thing called a spectrum analyzer. This is that thing on your car stereo that you don't understand why it's on your car stereo, but late at night you're like, that's the guitar. That one right there, right? So these are low frequencies, these are high frequencies. And what this is doing is this is creating a delay line. So it's got a little memory in it. And if something's really loud, you see now. And if it's really quiet, you see 10 seconds ago. And that's it. Simple, right? But it creates this really cool interaction schema where I can pass this out into the audience, and people can do things with it and then see the music influence what goes on the screen based on their cinematography on the spot, right? So that you can make out and then watch yourself make out. You could do crazy passes across the bar. You could do all kinds of fun stuff. And I thought this was kind of a cool place to think about, transmedia and turning things from one, way of describing them or visualizing them or thinking of them to another. So this is another one. It's a bit more modernist. This is listening to me, right? Right. And so this is like a piece for string quartet. And I made oodles and oodles of these. And at a certain point, I thought it would be fun to play them back. And so if I take my voice, let's see if this is going to work. Is this going to work? This is all software I've written a long time ago, and let's find out if it's going to work. My dog has fleas. Testing 1, 2, 3. Oh, so close. Anything? No. Damn. Wait, do we hear anything? Oh, wait a minute. I hear something. Testing 1, 2, 3. Here's something, but I don't see anything. My dog has fleas. Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's so interesting. My dog has fleas. Testing 1, 2, 3. My dog has fleas. Testing 1, 2, 3. If you were to see a picture there, my dog has fleas. It would be showing you a shape, and the shape would kind of represent my dog. Let me just try this in a slightly earlier version of the software. It would show you sort of what my sound looks like, and I'll tell you a trick, and why I think this is kind of interesting. I should have checked this before we started today, but I ran up here and had to plug in this other thing. Yes, I know the new version is available. It doesn't work. All right, so let's try this. Lots of errors. I love errors. My favorite kind of things going wrong in a live demo. All right, that's my microphone. That's a Crestron. This is a Let's try this again. Oh, there's a line. This is gonna work. All right. My dog. Oop, nope. Hello. There we go. My dog has fleas. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Go. There we go. That's it. Now you guys see what I'm talking about. Okay. So the dirty little secret of this piece of software is it didn't record my voice. It made this image. And you're hearing it playing back the image. Fleas. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Right. And so that means you can do some things you're not supposed to do. My dog has fleas. Testing. Like freezing. Play it. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Play it really fast. Right? Or do things like blur it. Right? So you know what? Slow it back down. Let's see what this sounds like. Right? You blur images all the time when you're photoshopping. Why can't you blur sound? And I thought that was kind of fun. And I started thinking of like, what am I going to do with this? So here's what I'm going to do with it. So the first thing I did with it was I took every #1 song on the Billboard Hot 100 and sped it up to last for 1 second for every week it was at #1. Because the red line can move at any speed. So this gives you a time lapse of 50 years of music in 37 minutes. That makes sense. If a song lasts for 10 weeks at #1, it lasts for 10 seconds. It lasts for 1 week at #1, it lasts for 1 second. You can hear the kind of average sonority of the sound. You're about to hear the Chipmunk song. Right. This is kind of musicologically interesting to some people, like all of 1978's in the key of F. Because the guys in the Bee Gees can only sing one note. If you grew up listening to pop radio in the United States, you have part of this memorized. Whether you like it or not, you can be like, I love this song, I hated this song, I lost my virginity right there, whatever it is, right? This is sort of internalized in your mind as a cultural canon. So I did a few of these. The next one I did was I took every Academy Award Best Picture and sped it up to last for 1 minute each. So this is 75 movies in 75 minutes. It is completely unwatchable. I really don't recommend it. But let's find something we know. That is Casablanca. Right? So this is Casablanca. The whole movie's in there. I'm not skipping through the film. I'm averaging the film. If you understand the difference, right? So everything's very blurry. But you can still tell that this is Casablanca, right? Rick still looks like Rick, Ilsa still looks like Ilsa, Paris still looks like Paris, whatever. And if you zoom ahead to a more contemporary film like Chicago, which is where I stopped, it's much less legible. It's much harder to tell what movie it is. And that's because of the pace of the editing. The average length of a cinematic shot in the 1940s was about 30 seconds. It was still filmed like theater. And now it's about 6 seconds, right? We're speeding everything up as we go. Rounding all this out, I did a project that got me in a lot of trouble with a certain octogenarian pornographer where I sped up all the Playboy Playmates of the month. And if you think of these 3 things, regardless of whether you like them or not, they exist in lists. And they exist in lists about American culture, and they're really interesting because they're all considered important, but they're anti-democratic, if that makes sense to you all, right? In order to get a #1 song, you need the collusion of several major multinational corporations, right? The Academy Awards are actually a peer review, to put it in academic terms. We never voted for Casablanca. A bunch of directors voted for Casablanca. Don't even get me started about Playboy. But it gives you a sense of how this all kind of works. And I started thinking about that, and then I started getting into text. And this is where we will pause to consider a little bit about current events. So in 2008, I got asked to do a project for the Democratic National Convention of the United States, right? So 2008. So it was in Denver. It was the candidate at the time was a gentleman from Illinois named Barack Obama. He was not yet president. The current president was a guy named George W. Bush. And the Democratic Party of the United States has an art curator on staff when they do conventions. They do big art shows. So that's interesting. And they asked me to do something with words, and I had no idea. I'd never done anything with words before, and I had no clue. But I found this amazing archive called the American Presidency Project at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I showed up and declared myself their artist in residence. They had no idea what that meant, but they gave me a seat and told me to sit down. It is what we would now refer to as a digital humanities archive. They were really great. I did a whole bunch of silly iterations. I made a Billboard Hot 100 of things presidents say all the time. God bless America. I am not a crook, whatever. Right. But I got kind of stalled out. Like I couldn't really figure out what to do. And then I was watching TV. And I was watching TV at like 3 a.m. Do you remember this show Crossfire on CNN? Do you remember this old show? So this is sort of two people with main character syndrome on the American political left and two people with main character syndrome on the American political right yelling at one another for an hour. And there is occasionally a guest who is caught in the crossfire, right? And so one of the people on the American political left at the time, a guy named James Carville, best known for saying, "It's the economy, stupid," was on there talking about the president at the time, George W. Bush. And the word he kept using was vision. He kept saying the problem is he has no vision. Doesn't have a vision. So I'm sitting there at 3 a.m. eating Doritos in my underwear in a Motel 6 in Santa Barbara, California. Cool Ranch Doritos, which is super important because the aftertaste is worse than the taste. So you keep eating them. And I realized that the way you test someone's vision is you make eye charts. So this is George Washington's eye chart. These are the 66 words he used in his State of the Union addresses more than any other president. And so George W. Bush, who was president at the time I made this piece, his number one word was terror, right? And the way you get from gentleman to terror in 43 easy steps is a history lesson, right? We can sort of imagine some of these. Ronald Reagan is deficits. Richard Nixon, interestingly, is truly. Richard Nixon's speechwriter was an amateur linguist, right? A guy named Bill Sapphire. Bill Clinton spent most of the time talking about the century in which he would no longer be president. Some of these you can sort of imagine, right? FDR was Democratic. FDR gets all the good words because he has the most words, because he gave 15 of these damn things. Herbert Hoover, you can see it was unemployment. Calvin Coolidge, this is the last time in my life, that New Orleans flooded before Katrina. And some of these, you can very much imagine they all make sense, right? Abraham Lincoln would be emancipation. And these are portraits. We don't think of them immediately as portraits, but if you sort of look at what we think of as like a real portrait, like this is a real portrait. This is Gilbert Stuart's portrait of George Washington. This is called the Lansdowne portrait. This is the portrait of George Washington that was given as a peace offering to the British delegation in the Paris peace talks. It has all that kind of stuff you expect in a painting that is a portrait. He's got a sword, but it's in his left hand, so he's a man of peace. There's a rainbow out the window that my 5-year-old could have drawn. He's got like a pen thing, right? And so I started thinking, well, what if we started actually paying attention to the things they said rather than what they looked like? Where could we get? And so this piece exists. It is a big, crazy sculpture. That I will show you by just simply doing a Google image search of it. There it is. Looks like this. It's 43 massive light boxes. They are to scale. If you can stand 20 feet back and you can read that line, you have 20/20 vision. It is important to make things that are useful. It's been touring the country ever since. But there's a problem with it. Well, there's a bunch of problems with it, which we'll get to in a sec. One of which is that trick, that word counting trick, which is an algorithm called a term frequency inverse document frequency, has some flaws. And we'll discuss them in a minute when I get to the sequel. So I thought to myself, this is a really cool portrait of America, except it only counts 43 individuals, and that's pretty lame. So I thought to myself, well, I should make another one that is a bit more inclusive. And so I started thinking to myself, well, you know what? This was around 2009, 2010. I was like, you know what? Let me make a census because the government's making one. So shit, I got time, right? And so I started looking for a corpus of data that would be of people in the United States describing themselves. And what I landed on was online dating. So I joined 21 different online dating sites in every zip code in the United States as a straight man, a gay man, a straight woman, and a gay woman, and downloaded everybody I matched with. I downloaded how many? 19 million people. 19 million people. So if you're a student here and your parents were doing online dating, then I have their dating profile. So what I did was I made for this one, it was a spatial thing. So I made maps. And so if you look at what I did, I made maps and I scanned a Rand McNally trucker atlas and I replaced every city with more than 10,000 people with the word people use in that city more than anywhere else. So this is the area around Seattle, Washington. If you've ever dated anyone from Seattle, this makes perfect sense. Heartbreak, pretty, right? They play in a band, they fucking smoke, right? You get the idea, right? This is Redmond, Washington, which is the headquarters of the Microsoft Corporation. They have nothing better to say for themselves. Some of these you can imagine what they're going to be, right? So San Francisco is gay. Los Angeles is, wait for it, acting. Yay. I'll show you the cities in a minute. Let's get down to someplace fun that I can sort of talk about in a bit more detail. That's Florida. That's an exciting one. Let me find, these are all online. Oh, so let me find New Jersey real quick, just so I can show you what it looks like. Yeah, so here's a good one. I grew up somewhere between annoying and cynical in New Jersey, so that tracks. If you look at New York City overall, New York City's number one word is now, which completes the sentence, I'm an actor, but now I'm working as a waiter or something like that. Like now I'm working, right? So that's something you would say in an online dating profile. My favorite word, though, of the whole thing is this is Syracuse, New York. Dinosaur. And the reason it's dinosaur is the only good place to eat in Syracuse, New York is a Hell's Angels barbecue joint called Dinosaur Barbecue, right? So that's where you take someone on a date, right? So, and that happens periodically across the country. So Lincoln, Nebraska's number one word is Osaka, which is the hip downtown sushi restaurant. You get it? If you go to the zip code level, you see some fun stuff, right? We are somewhere around nefarious artist, curator, green market, exhibition, blah, blah, blah. I used to live in the no man's land behind the tunnel. I used to live somewhere between Unconditional and Midsummer. This is gentrified North Brooklyn. And so that's kind of fun. And so that's like, kind of a fun thing to look at. And I even did one on myself so that I would feel like I was sort of thinking about what I'm doing and how it makes sense. So I took about 500,000 emails of mine and evaluated the words that were in the emails and who I was emailing to, and created a sort of physics engine visualization of my email. So this is a thing, and if I zoom in, it will sort of resolve. And so my emails are these kind of centers, like a universe. And if I've said to you, I love you, you are heavier to me, if that makes sense. But if my rhetoric is more formal, you are out in the outer reaches of the universe, right? And so that's sort of a self-portrait of this thing. And this trick doesn't really work, and we'll sort of get to that in a sec. But let me show you a couple other things before we get there. I also have done things where I think about what it means to accelerate things or decelerate things in kind of very radical ways. I have 3 films that kind of show this. I did a project in 2007 where I took over the traffic island off of Union Square for 3 days, made a 3-day film with a performance artist named Leon Cifuentes. she spent 72 hours doing 72 minutes worth of activity. So she was getting ready for a date in slow motion, filmed it all, full public view, and then sped it up at 60 speed. So anything she did in the film that took an hour takes a minute in the film. Anything that took a minute takes a second. You can see sort of the clock behind her spinning quickly, right? So the sun is going to go up. There's no CGI in this. This is a public performance on the street. She does her thing. She tries on dresses. It takes her 7 hours to do her lipstick. It takes her 14 hours to do her nails. And we live scored it, and we had it in full public view. And at the end, she hails a cab, right? And the project was sort of thinking about, pay attention to what you're paying attention to, right? Think about the heartbeat of the city and the dialogue between someone moving really slowly who shouldn't be and people moving at normal speed. And I sort of turned this into a little trilogy. So I made another unwatchable piece in New Orleans is a fundraiser for the Prospect Biennial, where I got 350 high school marching band musicians synchronized by radio to converge on a park playing a single piece. So you could have followed a band, or you could have sat in the park and watched it, right? Or you could work with media to kind of understand what it is. And we made a bunch of remixes. And then rounding that out, I did a project where I wrote a piece of music intended to be played at the wrong speed. And I've done this a few times, but I'll give you like the sort of insight into this. This is Tactus, which is the contemporary music ensemble. So I wrote a 4-minute piece, filmed them one at a time in my apartment. So far, so good. Right? You can see my shaky handheld camera work. I'm pretty bad at it. But you get the idea. It's just some music. But then the trick is the camera is filming at 240 frames a second. And the audio recording is incredibly high precision. And so when you play it back at 1/10 speed. So it's 40 minutes. So vibrato, music vibrato becomes more tonal. The acoustic space expands. Right? It's from my apartment, sometimes in church. Lots of stuff like that. And that kind of gives you a little bit of a kind of fun thing you can do with media. Not everything that I work on is super fun or uplifting. So I'll show you a couple of those and then we'll get back to the words. So I showed you a little quick piece from New Orleans. Let me show you another one. How do I even start this? This is a Walter PPK 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Those are my cigarettes. That was used in a shooting in New Orleans around Valentine's Day, actually about 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, 2014, in an altercation outside my house. Two guys got into a fight over this parking space and shot each other dead from their cars. The New Orleans Police Department cynically refers to this as a zero-sum crime. And so they gave me the gun to do something with. This is the hard to find drawer at the local hardware store. And this is a piece about the Internet of Things. So when you work with the Internet of Things is thought of as, I download some software to update the lighting in my house so that my coffee maker can wake me up or whatever. But this is also about that same phenomenon. I take a gun, I weld it to a plate, and I have it so it can be actuated by a gear chain by computer. And so Eric Holder, President Obama's Attorney General, passed a rule. You guys are going to be familiar if you've been watching the news, actually, where this came from, because it was framed as coming from the president. So it's something called an executive order. And it stipulates that any city with more than 10,000 people in the United States has to have an open data feed. So this is the beginning of the open data movement. So what I do is I take the gun and put it in a fancy art gallery.
Go for it.
And then whenever someone's shot in the city, it fires.
All right. Okay. That's loud as.
So it's listening to the open data feed of the city it's in. And so what happens when you do that is, the vitrine it's in fills up with bullets, right? And you all know what this is called because you use it all the time. This is called data visualization. right? And this is why data visualization, when used in general public discourse, can be really, really troubling because it can be anesthetizing, right? So I've toured this piece for about I toured it for about 7 years and then stalled out in Chicago. I showed this in Minneapolis, St. Paul. I showed this in Philadelphia. I showed this in Washington, D.C. I showed this in the public library in a suburb of St. Louis, Missouri called Ferguson. And I did a whole bunch of work around talking to people about why it is that gun violence just dissipates in the way we talk about it in America. And the culprit, we believe, is that we have replaced photographs with bar graphs. And bar graphs just hit differently than photographs. And we start treating people like numbers. I have a kind of second piece around gun violence that I did right before my daughter was born with the Tamarin Foundation, Tamarin Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico. These are lithographs. These are hand-drawn data visualizations around mass shootings in the United States, where before the lithography ink was set, I shocked the lithograph plate with gunfire, right? So the print is actually disturbed. If that makes sense. And that is something that I think about a lot in consideration of the work I do and how it all works and how it all fits, to be able to like kind of revisit these things and realize that maybe the thing I was doing actually was not great. And so I sort of tacked away from that. I'm going to show you like a couple more things, and then we'll consider something else. So everybody these days talks a lot, whether you like it or not, about this thing called artificial intelligence, which is neither artificial nor intelligent. It's man-made. And it does what it's told in a lot of ways. So an early example of this, I did a project where, let me see if I can find it. Here's an example. I did an artist residency in Times Square, right? Which doesn't make any sense. So let me try to describe what that is. The Times Square Alliance let me hang out in Times Square for a summer and gave me an office. And one of the things I discovered while I was walking around was that people were taking selfies all the time. This is about 10 years ago. And I discovered that doing a little bit of research and calling up some people who I knew who worked on this stuff, the Times Square is the most Instagrammed place on earth, right? Something like every 3 seconds, someone like commits a selfie in Times Square. Like it just constantly, people are constantly photographing themselves. So back in 2015, you could do this. You can't do this anymore. I downloaded them all. I downloaded several million photographs from Times Square and ran them into what at the time was a pretty novel piece of software that was doing generative image creation off of a corpus. So this is an example of early generative machine learning. So at the start of the film, where the hell is my cursor? There it is. Start of the film, these are real people. These are not real people. These people do not exist, right? So these are hypothetical selfies of Times Square denizens, and I thought this was pretty groovy, and I thought it was kind of fun to play with. And obviously, if you do this 10 years later in 2025, this is much better looking, and the people really look like people, and you can fool everyone and whatever. But I thought it would be an interesting thing. I always thought it'd be a really interesting thing to sort of cover Times Square with, fraudulent selfies of all of these mysterious glowing faces. I made a group of projects in the 2016 election, also playing around with this, called the Learning Machines. These were vintage voting machines that did canonical sort of GPU revolution exercises in AI, so things like neural nets and stuff like that. But the real thing that I did was in 2018, I was asked to represent the United States in the London Design Biennial, which is a big art thing. in London, or a big design thing in London. And I co-presented with a buddy of mine named Zach Lieberman, who teaches at the MIT Media Lab. And the most important thing to tell you is we forgot to read the directions. And so this was a nationally pavilioned design biennial, and the theme that they had picked was states of emotion. And what you were supposed to do was you were supposed to pick an emotion and design your pavilion around it. Example, the country of Japan chose joy, right? And they designed an entire pavilion around joy, right? The United Kingdom chose guilt. They took an entire empty room, put a diagonal line across it, representing the sort of colonial border as drawn by their empire, and then engaged with a whole bunch of fascinating, British designers of Swana descent to do things in it, right? We totally forgot to read the directions. It was like a 200-page brief, and we were like, fuck it, we can figure this out. And so we did this project about what it means to design with emotion, and we decided to do something with AI. And so Zach made a lovely piece about, kind of playful things with it. I made a dystopian portrait machine. So it's a photo booth. Like you're gonna take it Coney Island.
Don't
instead,
smile.
what it does,
We'll help you out. Let's get started.
Anger is an intense
Your
negative
emotion is
emotion
anger.
that involves a
Come
Please
on,
act
give it some
angry for the
energy.
next 30
hostile
seconds.
response to a
Anger is
presentation
triggered by
of
emotional
hurt.
hurt. Angry people often
Anger is
turn
an
red.
intense negative emotion
Our eyebrows
that
drop
involves
down
a
and
strong,
squeeze together.
unacceptable, and hostile
Adults get
response
angry about
to
once a day.
perceived provocation, hurt, or threat. Anger can occur when a person feels
Get
that personal
angry.
boundaries are violated. Some react to anger through retaliation as a way of coping. Anger.
Are you angry?
Let's see how you did. Oh, not too bad.
The computer thinks you were
Disgusted.
The computer thinks you are.
white.
Male,
Between
15 and 20.
In the United States of America, data like this is regularly collected without the knowledge of the population.
Have a great day.
right? So we set this up for a couple weeks in England. The cast, this is very important, are the incredible, brilliant MFA students from our very own graduate acting program at NYU Tisch. So I borrowed them for this project, their voices and their images. And we set it all up. And alongside it, I had a film sort of talking about, why this doesn't work. And one of the reasons it doesn't work is the data sets underneath it are all messed up, right? One of the canonical data sets that was being used at the time for emotion detection was created at the university formerly known as Ryerson. It's called RAVDES. It's a Ryerson audiovisual database of emotional speech and song. And it consists of 25 mostly white 19-year-old acting students in Canada over emoting on camera. So when they're sad, they're literally crying. When they're angry, they're scowling. And it just kind of blows apart. And all of this gets to a thing that I'm working on right now. Two things that I'm working on right now. One is a speech synthesizer. So in my day job, where I work with all of you, I help out with a really amazing shop at NYU called the Ability Project. It's been it's been cooking for a little over a decade now. The director is my incredible colleague named Amy Hurst in Steinhardt's Department of Occupational Therapy, jointly appointed with my group at Tandon. And for the last 2 years, I've been working on a project interrogating the speech synthesizer, and the speech synthesizer in a context in which it's used, in which it was not designed to be used. So if you think about speech synthesis and what it is, right? What is it? Do I say speak or say? I think I say. Yeah, say hi there.
Hi there.
There you go. Right? That's kind of what it sounds like, right? Yeah, my dog has fleas.
My dog has fleas.
Love it. All right. So this whole thing, dates back to the 1970s, right? Ray Kurzweil, the reading machine. It was originally intended, and this is an important thing, to be a system to help read text for people who are BLV, for people who are blind, low vision. So the voice in the Kurzweil system is embodying the computer, not a person, right? So when push comes to shove, it doesn't matter so much. JAWS, which is the current state-of-the-art PC system for this technology, still uses literally Ray Kurzweil's voice as the default voice. Nobody really thinks about it, and it's fine because it's your machine talking to you. So think about Siri or Alexa or whatever. At a certain point, we started integrating speech synthesis into augmentative and alternative communication devices. So these are systems where a person is using this to create their voice. Yeah. But we never upgraded the speech synthesizer. And so it sounds the same. And that's bad, right? And so we've been working for a couple years around this opera. The composer's named Paolo Prestini. Director is a guy named Jeroen Herman. And this is an opera called Sensorium X that is substantially cast and directed by people with cerebral palsy. And so everybody on stage has CP. Quite a diverse population. And what that means is a couple of the people on stage can't speak. And that's interesting because it's an opera. So we're creating a speech synthesizer where they can sing. And so we've been doing a couple years of design research around it. A lot of it is around, following our rules of the Ability Project. We followed Nothing About Us Without Us. We've talked with about 45 folks who use these devices in depth. They consider them static and difficult to personalize. The systems exhibit internal ableism. So like that's a fancy way of saying the top of the line speech synthesizers are actuated by a keyboard. So if you want it to say a thing, you got to type it. Not everybody can type that thing to get it to say that thing, so that's a problem. And they don't have the ability to express nuance and emotion or spontaneity. This was said best to us by one of our stakeholders, who said that she really wanted to be able to do something that almost all her friends can do and that she sensed that people around the world can do. She really wanted to be able to say the phrase, "I'm fine," to her boyfriend in a way that indicated that she was very much not fine. And that is a thing that I consider very much like within the boundaries of like, that is a human rights issue. You should be able to sarcastically tell off your boyfriend. And if your speech synthesizer can't do that, you need a better one, right? So we've been working on that for a while. And the basic thing that we've been doing an ML thing, is we've created a super posh 401 parameter model of the human vocal tract. So it's a thing called a variational autoencoder. And we've been modeling people talking. And we've also been modeling people emoting. So same thing, I've been recording people trying to sound angry, trying to sound sad, whatever. If you're wondering, if you're looking at me opening things on the computer and wondering what the hell is the thing with the spaghetti on the screen that he keeps opening up, this is a piece of software I helped write a long time ago called Max MSP. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if this damn thing works. And then we're gonna talk about it. ES9 Crestron, I don't know. If this doesn't work, don't get mad at me. But it might work. Let's try it. Let's see if I can play Steve Jobs here. Come on, Steve. Do it.
Welcome you to the next world. We think you're
There
going
he
to love
is.
this computer. It's got the most advanced applications of any computer shipping
I can take
today,
anybody on
and
Earth,
it's the first computer designed from scratch.
and
to
I
be
can
an
record them
interpersonal
and have the computer try to figure out the physique
Impersonal
that created that
computing
thing.
into the realm of
So the physical
impending
parameters of the
brute
voice.
productivity
And then I can mess with it.
collaboration. With
So I can do
Felipe
things
displayed
like,
the most exciting thing
I don't know,
happening in
change
desktop
their
computing in the
pitch.
first half of the 90s. So welcome to the next world.
Right?
And let us
I can
know
also
what
add
you think of
noise.
the
I can also change their
agency.
speed.
Hello, this is
But I
Steve
can also
Jobs.
do things like change their phoneme order
You're
and make a
gonna
bunch
love
of
this
rules.
computer.
And so the
It's
fun
got
thing
the
about
most
this
advanced application.
is I can do things like if you're going to say an R, if the system is teed up to say an R sound, and that R is before another consonant, but it's not at the start of the word, drop it. And then I've given you a Boston accent, right? Stuff like that. And the whole idea is this is supposed to be personalizable and whatever, and it's going to be groovy. But before I leave, before we stop and ask questions and give up for a sec, I want to get back to this thing that I showed earlier on about text. So the reason these things don't really work is they're susceptible to little bugs. And so if we go to my little dating map, let's talk about this for a sec. All right. All of these words are unique. So, for example, people in Washington, D.C. say they're interesting. Okay, let's talk about some people in Washington, D.C. All right, so they think they're interesting. So what that means is that they use the word interesting more than anybody else, right? All these words are unique. So these are margin calls, right? If I just said the most popular word, everything would be love and Los Angeles would be sex, right? So these are all about tiny, tiny differences. So if everybody in a tiny town in like South Carolina really likes snowboarding, they're going to get the word snowboarding by outcompeting someplace you would imagine snowboarding would be. If they only have like 4 single people, statistically, they're going to outrank it. And so if you look at, let's get some code work in here. So like, I don't know, did you guys see, let's see, who, let me see, where is it? It's on my computer. Yeah. Raise your hand if you have read this report. Okay. Let's talk about this report. Back in October, a guy from Washington, D.C., he's actually from Texas. Actually, he's Canadian. I should say that again. Named Ted Cruz, commissioned a report that is a hit piece against the National Science Foundation. All right. He did it before the election. He did it in the Senate in October. And at the very, very bottom of the report are a bunch of words. This is a very Luc DuBois approach to things, which is why I'm bringing it up. So there's a bunch of words. And he claims, or his staff claims, or his staff using ChatGPT claim, that 93.8% of federal science grants use these words. Okay. Right? Makes sense. And this word list is actively being distributed along with a pretty fun pie chart, a pretty fun ordering chart used by federal funders to decide whether it violates President Trump's most recent executive orders against DEI. So they were using this list of words, matching it against your proposal, and following this chart. And so, you know, I know how to program a computer. Let's try it on Ted Cruz's speeches. So if we had, so if I had all these words in a list, right? So if I had all these words in a list, right? Here's all these words, right? These are the bad words, according to Ted Cruz. And, the speech he is most famous for, right, I believe, is his filibuster against Obamacare. Do you guys remember this? In 2013, right, he literally talked for like 24 hours, including reading Dr. Seuss to try to stop us from getting health care. Everybody remember this, right? Because at that time, he still had a Canadian passport. So if we were to take this and run it, let's see how he does, all right? So let's see. Node word count. Hey, man. Yeah, there's 40 bad words in that speech, right? So these are the words he uses. And so pretty much there's no way to pass this test. And I want everybody to just remember that and keep it in your head, because if you think about it, the things I've shown you today are, some of them are quite old, right? So I did that eye chart piece in 2007, 2008. These techniques are just normal practice in what you would think of as kind of amateur data science, and they're very dangerous when you're not paying attention. And so thinking of these words as bad, or thinking of these words as things that must be excised, or things that must be considered and whatever, is an aspect of anticipatory obedience. And I would encourage all of you to use them as much as you can. All right. So anyway, that gives you a good signal to take some questions. Okay. Thanks.